Hello and welcome to another episode of Corgi Town USA. I am Candy. In my lap is Chuckles, our spokescorg.
And I am Catherine. At my feet is Digby, my corgi, and Calabria, my honorary corgi. She is a cattle dog.
Yes, and of course in studio we have Mortimer Barnabas, Little Booger, our senior lady, and Tito Bandito, the youngest member. If you're new here, hi, welcome. We are here for you every week, all things corgi and pet parent lifestyle. We have some fun episodes. We're here to entertain, delight, and inform you, ladies and gentlemen. So we try to be a source of information, and we try very hard to make sure we're getting the right information out there.
Very true.
As such, we generally do at least one episode per season on DM, degenerative myelopathy. And part of this is I am on the board for Shade Out DM, a nonprofit. So full disclosure there, but also that's for awareness because I'm very passionate about it. I was part of that organization before my own hammer began and succumbed to the disease. So one of the things we try to guide you on here is what conversations to have and what questions to ask a potential breeder, because we feel like it is very, very important where you get your puppy. And we need to be careful about these unsavory breeding practices. And most of us know about like puppy mills are not a great place. A lot of the times pet stores are not a great place because they purchase from puppy mills. And what we try to do is give you information in that some quote unquote reputable breeders sometimes are not so reputable. And we're not here to call out anybody. It's just we want to give you the information. But for this specific episode, we're going to talk about degenerative myelopathy and genetic testing.
Yes.
One of my bare minimums, our bare minimums, is make sure that they are testing for degenerative myelopathy and the presence of a gene which can put them at risk. So it come to my attention recently that there's some, I guess we can call it buzz or rumors, that carriers of the SOD1 gene can potentially develop, perhaps.
Perhaps, maybe. So the SOD1 gene is the gene that develops.
There's more than one, though.
There's more than one.
This is the one we know a little bit about.
Right. That can develop DM. And this is to inform, not alarm, because
we don't want you to be scared. We just wanted to have a philosophical conversation about what a carrier is, what that means.
Right. What a carrier is, what at risk is, and what clear is. I think those definitions need to be done. First and foremost, whoever you, if you are purchasing from a breeder, they need to do all the tests. All the tests.
There's a lot of tests, but there are some basic ones that we think are non-negotiable. EIC, exercise-induced collapse, VWD, CIV, von Willebrand bleeding disorder. We also recommend OFA hip and eye testing, although jury's kind of out on that. My personal vet thinks that it's not necessarily as accurate. Again, a whole other philosophical conversation.
It's a whole other philosophical question.
If your breeder is concerned about conformation of their pups, that is a green flag. That's where OFA comes in.
Yes. So first and foremost, make sure you get it from a breeder that tests now.
And gives you evidence of testing.
And gives you evidence.
And before we get too far in the weeds there, how we got here was we were talking about breeders breeding carriers. So up to this point, information that we think we had is you breed carrier to clear, you produce clears and carriers, meaning carriers are not supposed to develop as far as we know. That being said, I have a puppy who is a carrier. That breeder does test that I got him from, and they're not supposed to be at risk. I would not recommend nor purchase from a breeder that breeds at risk. That is a non-negotiable for me. But as we're talking about this, we have made friends with a wonderful veterinarian who is on the line today, who is going through the DM journey with her puppy dog Chet, and looking at her potential next puppy. And so we thought we would have a good philosophical conversation about this, genes, testing, how we got here, with somebody who's actually living it. And this is not the first time she's dealt with DM. Should we bring her on?
Absolutely.
Everyone, please welcome Dr. Stephanie Evenson, DVM. Welcome to the show, Stephanie.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We would love for you to just kind of tell our audience, tell our listener, viewer about you, who you are, how you got here.
Okay, I actually have graduated quite a while ago. I did have kind of a roundabout journey. I was in small animal practice. I ended up teaching our veterinary technicians, who essentially are nurses. So I've been in there, and then I got into more of an academia field. So right now I actually work in academia. So I'm really interested in research, because I actually am a member of our IACUC, which is the people who actually make sure the studies are done right and protect the animals during the study. So
That's great.
I'm, like I just kind of a nerd, right? I read papers on it, very interested in DM just because, I've gone through it. This is a second time. Still don't feel like we know enough. I wish that there was more funding for it.
Yeah, same. Yeah, that's something we're pretty passionate about. With Shade Out DM, it's awareness.
Right.
We're all about awareness. And Bubba's Buddies, I think, was working with some universities on doing some actual fundraising for research. Most of what we do with Shade Out DM is awareness. So thank you for sharing that. And I am sorry for what you're going through with Chet. And I'm sorry that you've had to go through this more than once. I did it once with Hammer last November, had to say goodbye. And there are a lot of layers to anticipatory grief, constant questioning. There's so many layers to dealing with this disease. And as far as perspective, you get that perspective, baptism by fire. You really understand when you walk through it. So I would love to hear your thoughts. And I think you have some papers to reference. Would love to kind of dig into that for listener viewers to kind of get sort of an educational background. You can speak more intelligently than I can, because I don't have those letters behind my name.
No.
So we would love to hear kind of your thoughts on it based on what you've read and what you know so far on your end.
First of all, I just want to say that like the major sites don't even agree. So there's lots of universities that test for DM, and then companies as well. So even if you get one of those genetic testing on your dogs, you want to find out what breed your mutt is, they sometimes will include it, depending on which one you select for, right? Which test you order. So they don't all agree. So I was just looking at the websites. UC Davis, Cornell, Embark, OFA has, like that testing as well, or they associate with it. All of them say something different. And I think some of that is we don't know. We don't know for sure. And, I can't say when they last updated some of these things, but just from kind of a hearsay and talking with some of my friends and colleagues, they have seen what they think is DM with some of these carrier dogs, where they haven't found any other explanation except for DM. And usually, so DM is a rule out diagnosis. If your dog is at risk for it, it doesn't mean 100% that it will get that disease. There's a lot of factors going in it, and we just don't know. So when you have that at-risk dog, your dog has a chance, right? Carriers, that's all up in the air yet. We don't know because, they see diseases that look like DM. And when they try to do a rule out and like, okay, let's check the disc, let's check if there's a spinal tumor, let's do this MRI, let's do more scanning, let's do a spinal tap. So they do all that and they're not finding any infection, they're not finding tumor, they're not finding a disc, and they don't see any compression of that spinal cord. They're like, well, what else could it be? It has to be DM, but they're not, they're essentially a carrier. So what happened there? And nobody really has an answer for me. Talking to my friends, there's been all sorts of kind of guesses where they're like, well, maybe it's something else like it, or maybe there's other genes that we're not testing for. So if you look at the human side of research, I think it's almost even muddier because there's a familiar form of ALS, but not everybody gets that. Most people, it seems like it's the random, who knows how that happened form. So what is it that set it off? And, again, all sorts of guesses. Is it just the right set of genes? And then all of a sudden you encounter that a few things in your environment that set it off, or you're really stressed, or what does that? And I think you can drive yourself kind of crazy with that and things like cancer, asking yourself why. But right. you may not ever get a cancer or a reason why for that cancer, or DM or something in your lifetime, right? You don't know. So I think that's what makes it especially hard to advise people too, because we don't know. And animal research, it is not as extensive as humans. If you look at any of the studies and you look at how many they studied, so that's called the sample size, humans, they might get like thousands of people, right, in this study. In animals, you might have, like, if you're lucky, 50 dogs. And, if you're doing a smaller scale study, like, for things like surgery, maybe you have 9. And if you look at the statistics of that, you can't say with certainty how statistically significant those results are. So I think where we're getting better is we do have access to a lot more databases now. So we have, all these companies that are doing the genetic testing, especially again for people who want to find out, hey, I got this dog from the shelter. What is it? Is it have
Right.
Chihuahua in it or whatever? And so I think they're getting some of the data from there. They're getting some from these research labs, especially if you're ordering the test from like UC Davis. But we still have a skewed population when you do that, because most people don't do this test unless you're breeding or if you are worried your dog has it, right? So we're not testing all the dogs across the United States trying to find this. We're testing dogs that, we think might have it or have some other reason that they got tested. So that also interferes with us making really objective, conclusions about some of this stuff, because we can't say.
Right.
You can't say for certainty. So more informational so that you can make a choice that you can live with.
Yeah.
Would that be an accurate statement? Gather
Yeah.
the information so you can make a choice that you can live with.
The research that is published.
The research that is published.
And the research is published. If you, like, I just did a quick search on Google Scholar before, just trying to find out how many papers I could even find. I got a page at the beginning, and a lot of them are not recent. There's about, I don't know, there's more than one page, obviously, but there's not as much as you would like expect if you're typing in some kind like breast cancer or something.
Right.
And so a lot of the ones that they do research on too, it's actually dealing with the care of them, right? So there's that paper years ago where they talked about physical therapy improving and prolonging their lifespan by X number of months on average. So there's a lot of papers like that too, but there's only a few labs doing the actual genetics of this. So that's kind of at a disadvantage too, because the funding for this isn't going to be there, right? Unless I think more awareness or people, this is not a huge disease. Probably more dogs that right, personally have died of cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
this is not something that people are really testing. And if you talk to the ALS patients too, they're frustrated because even for human side, they're not a big research draw. Even
There's
though
not a
the ice
spotlight
bucket-
on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even the ice bucket challenge. I mean, that kind of was like a fad almost, right? Where they got money and then all of a sudden nobody cared anymore. And then people tried to take the ice bucket challenge from them. And that is sad because, like what makes something more important, right? And it essentially is, how bad is it? How good of a story does it make? And how many people does it affect, or how many dogs does it affect?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And thank you for sharing that. And I think I want to kind of bring back to, as you were talking about the research kind of being older, this is the SOD1 gene mutation that we're speaking about specifically, because that's kind of what we know the most about, if you want to say what we do. And that's just that we know that we can determine the presence of it.
Right.
And that's relatively new research in itself. We didn't have a test for degenerative myelopathy markers, 10 years ago, 12 years ago? It's relatively new.
Right. I think it was 2009, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds about right. And Shade Out DM was created because the founder had a dog that had symptoms and nobody quite knew what it was. And at that point, she's thinking, she's going to get better. We'll keep with the physical therapy. And then things start to come out and kind of flesh out. And that's how that organization was born.
Right.
And so because we're about that information, it ends up being a divisive issue, because you have people that say you don't have all the research. This is true. We're not negating that at all.
No.
But what I do want to talk about a little bit, and would love, Doctor, your philosophy on this as well. I know we talk about these genetic markers and at risk versus carrier. And the big thing that I kind of got caught on was, okay, well, we're learning that potentially there could be development in carriers. We understand it's rare, but we're also dealing off numbers that, Doctor, you mentioned, that are kind of all over the place and seem to be sort of anecdotal. So we're not sure how much we can hinge on that.
Right.
And traditionally, it's been understood carrier to clear produces carriers and clear, not at risk. And so it's carrier to carrier, or carrier at risk, or at risk that you can get potentials at risk. It becomes a divisive issue with breeders. And again, we love our good breeders. So let me put that out there. We are not anti-breeder. We don't want to paint ourselves that way. If you are breeding for the health, temperament, and well-being of these dogs, God bless you. We love you. Those are not the dogs that wind up in shelter and rescue. That's why we're so passionate about it. But to me, I have not been convinced that it's okay to breed at risk. So if we're talking about, and there have been a lot of arguments for that. That's just personally me. I have not been convinced. It's just such a devastating disease to deal with, and to see your dog go through it and you be helpless and go through it. And the breeders themselves, they don't have to deal with it when they develop it later in life. So to me, it's like, okay, when you have that perspective, maybe, but it's just personally, I haven't been convinced. So that's the information I want to get out there, that please don't buy from a breeder that's either not testing at all or is breeding at risk and knowingly breeding at risk. And that's what I would implore. But without getting too far in that, I would love to get your philosophy on this, Doctor, on what you think about that, because the argument from a lot of the breeders is, if we focus on this one genetic marker, we are weeding down our gene pool and we don't have as many good opportunities to breed healthy, otherwise well-temperamented pets.
Right. We can't just look at this one marker.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear your philosophy.
How do we do that?
Yeah.
That does, if you talk to anybody who's in biology, that does have, that's true. The narrower your gene pool, the more likely you're going to get genes that can emerge, especially recessive genes, that will be something you didn't expect, right? So this is why, in humans, you can't marry your first cousin or your brother, right? Because you're narrowing that gene pool. So if you got rid of all the dogs today that were at risk, and even, let's say, we'll throw that carriers in there, you're going to narrow that gene pool a lot. Even I think 10-ish years ago, when I was looking at how many dogs were in each category, the skew was to a lot of them at risk. I can't remember the numbers. I think it was around over 50%, but there were a lot at risk, and then the next big category was carrier, and then tiny clear. And so now they've gotten better. If you look at the numbers, there's more clears. So they have done it, but it's slow. Yeah. So you can't do this overnight. And I agree with that. I think you're going to select for something else that you had no idea was going to be there. Because let's say you just saw it in a few dogs, you're not going to make the connection that it's genetic, and we don't know all these genes. So I do agree with that. Right now, though, going through it, if I was breeding, I would not be able to breed an at-risk dog, just because the grief is there. And if you get an at-risk puppy, if someone hasn't been through it before, maybe they don't really know what's coming. Mm-hmm. But with Chet, I knew Chet was he was going to be at risk. From the last 5 or 6 years, I knew his dad got DM, and I had that hanging over my head the whole time. And people are like, don't worry, it won't happen twice. Lightning doesn't strike twice. You'll be fine. Why are you worried? And it still was weighing on me. So last year, when I noticed a little bobble in his gait, I was like, oh no. And I was really upset. And my friends are like, what is it? We don't see it. Literally don't see this. I took him to rehab. She's like, I don't see it. I think you're worrying too much. And about 3 months later, she's like, oh yeah, I guess you're right. And I've been grieving for a year just because I knew what was coming. He didn't go down till April. So this past April is when he went down. It is a long progression in him. I'm thankful for that, but I also have spent the year knowing what was coming and trying to delay it. And unfortunately, about April, he went down and he hasn't walked again. He's adjusting pretty well, but I will tell you that it bothers me probably more than him right now. But to see your dog go through it, it's not fun. It's frustrating for them sometimes. They can't get to where they want to go. And I think once you see that, your opinion of some of this stuff changes.
Right.
Because
100%.
until you go through it, I don't think you know what it's like to watch a dog slowly do this, and then all of a sudden there'll be another dip and whatever, and you see them lose that function. Same with people, I think.
Yeah.
You don't really know how bad like ALS or something like that can get till you see it.
Yeah.
And not that I wish that on anybody, but I wish that they would understand the grief and like the emotional turmoil that goes through that.
Right.
That's why we have a support group in Shade Off DM, that there's a lack of support. And we talk about gaslighting. I mean, it's again, we talk about numbers and information we don't have, but this very conversation is why I'm 100% don't breed at risk, right? Because that is very heavy. It is very palpable. And when you see it and when you go through it is completely different from talking about it, being around it, being empathized. It's a very perspective specific thing, because the feelings are there and things you didn't expect. And every day is kind of new. Miriam Valère, who we've had on the show a couple times, has gone through it multiple times. She wrote a book called Another New Normal. And that talks about how once you adjust and you get to a normal with DM, something else degrades. And then now you have a new normal you're managing.
Right.
And I felt like every time we got to a place of, okay, managed, boom, something else. Okay, this is not managed anymore. We have to, those are things that don't often get thought about when we talk about the grand scheme of things, of why we think this is so important, why we drive this home. But it's all that heart in it, right?
Argument and the gaslighting that we've experienced, that Tawny from Shade Out DM has experienced, that so many people have experienced, is you don't know.
Well, what you're talking about is the denial. That's what I was talking about. The denial of it's not DM. It can't be DM. We don't have a definitive diagnosis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That was what I was talking about with gaslighting.
The question is, when you've got a dog that presents with as a carrier versus a dog that presents with at risk of any disease versus a dog that presents as clear of any disease, what are the chances of the dog passing something along if they're bred, or of the dog developing that disease?
50-50.
What I'm trying to do is categorize. What are the chances of a clear dog developing DM? Let's start with that.
None that we know of.
None that we know of, but the dogs could get something that we don't know yet, right? There could be another gene we don't know that's in there, or it can get, disc disease. It can get infection. It can get a spinal tumor. So you could get something that looks exactly the same. So that can happen. Yeah,
that can happen. But as far as we know, with the information, it doesn't look like you can develop. Okay. Yeah. When you have a carrier, based on the information that we have right now, what may or may not be the risk of that dog developing DM?
Oh, we can't say it's 50-50. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah. What do we know right now if it's a carrier?
We don't.
Traditionally it's fine. It's not going to get it. It can only pass it to the kids. And then of course you have to look at the breeding of the other parent, right? So traditionally, and some of the websites still say this, right? Don't worry. If you're breeding, the only way you need to know that is if you're breeding. So I don't know. That's what I was taught, right?
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden, they've had these papers where there's other genes, and I don't think they're testing for them. Except for like in the Bernese or something, right? So it's just like, like, now what? If they found different, so they're called copies of a gene that are like, the gene for, let's say it was eye color, right? But, and there's more than one for eye color, but we'll just say that if there was one gene for blue eyes, right? Then the gene for brown eyes is called an allele. So it's a variant of the gene, right?
Yeah.
So this looks like they found a few forms of the gene. One is kind of the traditional one that they've been looking at for a long time. And the other one was this one that was more ancestral and generational. And they find it so we have like our breeds that are like the top ones that you would think at DM, right? And then we have like everybody else. And they look at everybody else, and they see this ancestral gene in them. and they're like, huh, that gene isn't there too. Huh, what if, they have this variant of this, but those dogs didn't get DM. So why is that? And so I just think that we don't have the answers. So yeah,
Right.
I think it's
And
hard to say.
It's hard to say, but can I say safe to say that clear probably not going to get DM as we know it, and at least not with the gene that we're looking at. Carrier
Probably not.
probably
Probably not.
not. And then if you are at risk.
And
50-50.
yeah, I said that's not 100% either,
Right.
Right, but
But-
it's 50-50. It's certainly more than carrier.
Yeah.
So at
risk is much higher risk. Yeah.
At risk is a higher risk. The point I'm getting at for anybody who's ready to jump down any of our throats about we don't know. We have enough information to say maybe it's stupid of me to be breeding at-risk dogs, or maybe it's stupid of me to go and get a dog.
Maybe not stupid, reckless.
Reckless. Thank you. Better word.
Yeah,
Sometimes
reckless.
Sometimes my words aren't right.
Reckless.
It's reckless of me to get a dog that shows an at-risk gene. That might not be my best bet unless I'm willing.
That was my whole point with why I haven't been convinced. To me, it's reckless to be breeding at risk when we know. Yeah.
My point.
Is that what you're wrapping up?
That's my point to that was we have proof that it's reckless. We have proof that it's reckless
on that end.
So please stop coming after anybody who says, that we have proof and maybe this is not the smartest thing in the world for you to be doing.
But I do want to illuminate that. And just like you were saying, Doctor, as well, I want to illuminate that some of in the DM community, when we get approached by what I will call naysayers, and often it's breeders, the naysayers that say, okay, we don't think that we should worry about this specifically because we do whittle down our gene pool for some other amazing qualities, such as good temperament, good conformation, otherwise lower risk of IVDD and other things, lower risk of cancer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, I get that argument. I do 100%. But if we're going to whittle that down and then whittle it down against when just because they are at risk does not mean they will develop it and you don't have the numbers there. Yeah, I will be the first to acknowledge that. We don't. You're absolutely right. Anyone saying that argument, I'm not arguing with that. I just have not been convinced that that's okay because again, doctor, just like you're going through it, once you have gone through it, you go, I'm sorry, but this is not okay. Right? That this is just not okay. And that's the stance I take. That's the stance we take in Shade Out DM, right? Because we've all gone through that journey. And I think that's what you were trying to get at.
Exactly. And so now you have the information, good breeder out there, make a decision of what you're going to do.
Yeah. We have a lot of wonderful ones. That's why we're getting more clear.
Exactly.
Those numbers, doctor, that you're talking about.
That's you have
that's
the information.
Thanks to you wonderful breeders who are paying attention.
Thanks to the wonderful breeders. You have the information. People who want to adopt a Corgi, ask your breeder if the dog has been tested, and then you make the decision on your own. We're not saying, yay or nay. We have personal opinions. We're just saying, here's the information.
This is why we think so.
This is why we think so.
And be open to asking rescue groups. Melissa at East Coast Corgi Rescue, Susan over at Queen's Best Stumpy Dog. We have Vicky here at Arizona Cactus Corgi Rescue. These wonderful people that pour their hearts into these rescue groups are great sources of information for you to reach out to ask questions and say, those crazy ladies over at Corgi Town USA told me XYZ. But I'm seeing this from something else. Please feel free to reach out to those resources to make a decision. But this is why we feel very, very passionate about this. And Dr. Evenson, thank you for your input here and your philosophy. And we don't want to keep you all night. We know you have a DM dog to take care of and you have a very busy life. Any final thoughts that you would like to leave our listener viewer with?
I just think that if people can support vet research or any of the things like Shade Out DM, I think they should, especially if that's your animal passion. I do believe in animal rescues and stuff too, so put your money there as well. But I will tell you that the lack of funding is very hard in the vet field. And I think it needs more awareness. I know that not everybody is an animal lover. It's hard to, Yeah, I know.
Who are
Isn't
these
that
people?
weird
Who are
that
these
on
people?
animals?
Not our listeners.
But I do think that would help, and also to raise awareness. And also, if you are going to get a puppy, ask the right questions. Ask your vet if if you're going in there for another reason, be like, hey, what do you recommend? Or they might have some local breeders that they'd recommend as well,
Sure.
because they see it, right? They see what's coming in, and they can give you some advice there. And I guess what's hard for me is I know a lot of people don't do that. You would think that if you're getting a family member, right, you would look at and ask the breeder these questions. And a lot of people just don't know any better right now. And then when
That's
I
why
have
we're
to
here.
tell them, oh no, like people that don't know about DM and Corgis, they would see mine and they're like, what's wrong with him? And then you're like, oh, well, they get this really bad genetic disease in their lines, if they're at risk for this gene. And they're like, what? I never heard of that. And you just are like, oh man, I didn't want to tell you that, like that wasn't something that I wanted to break that news for you, because now you're going to worry. And I just feel that if you do that before you get the puppy, at least it won't be hanging over your head like it's been hanging over mine for the last couple of years.
Tell them to listen to Corgi Town USA. These are the stuff that we try to tell people.
Mhm.
These are things that are concerns with our beloved breed.
And my kind of final words on this come from my perspective of being a grief coach. And that is, okay, so you figured out that, your dog is at risk. Okay, so you figured out, as in your case, doctor, that the dog's dad has DM. As best as you can, don't spend your dog's entire life wondering when the day will come.
Yeah.
I will
Don't
say
do
that
that.
I went today, he's still here. So especially last year when he's running around, I'm like, today he's still here. Today he's running across the yard. Today he's still standing. And so that did help a little bit, where don't worry about tomorrow, just today.
Nope.
Not today. Yeah, that was what I'd tell myself. Not today. That anticipatory grief with DM, whew, and other conditions as well. But yeah, DM is specific because you're a race against time. You have to make a decision before it gets to their lungs, and that I think I did relatively okay for the most part until we were about 2 weeks out, and then I just completely started buckling under. It is just such a compounded heavy feeling.
It is.
But we also have wonderful support groups. Shade Out DM has a support group on Facebook, and also Corgi on Wheels. Bobby Mayer wrote a book. They also have a wonderful group there as well. And these are collective hive mind of DM parents. People have gone through this. And I will also say, I mentioned gaslighting before. Another one of the arguments we hear is that there's not a definitive diagnosis, which is correct. And people would come for, well, you don't know until there's necropsy and you've got that. Well, this is true. But at the end of a DM journey, you're just completely exasperated emotionally, physically, financially, mentally. The thought of sending your dog off to go through that process so that you can get confirmed of something that you saw before your eyes. It's also very expensive, and there's only a handful of places you can get this done at. So the logistics involved, there are a lot of layers to that. But those of us that have seen the DM, we know. We know what it looks like. We know the difference between IVDD. They don't regulate temperature well. They get anxiety. They start having new vocalizations. There are all these different things that aren't just dragging feet and needing a wheelchair. There's a lot of different things that we see in it. And even in the veterinary community, which, by the way, we love you. We absolutely love you. And we love that the research that has been done, because things, and I think you mentioned, Doctor, off camera a little bit about some conditions that was, euthanize is the only option. We're learning more now that there are a lot of conditions that are very manageable, and that is such a gift to us as pet parents these days.
And it's all research.
To have tools and research and just the work that you all do in the veterinary community. I rely on my vet way more than I'm sure they would like me to, and I'm just so grateful. But even in that community, it can scare some off. I had an appointment one time with Hammer to get a just routine. We gave him Pentasan injections. It helped his joints. That's the joint lubrication. It helped him for the overcompensation, and some routine blood work. And my normal vet wasn't there. They had a traveling vet. And when I said something about DM when I made the appointment, the vet wouldn't even come in and touch it. I don't know if she thought I was trying to get treatment for it specifically, but no, I don't know. You don't know that that's what it is, and we can't confirm it. And she just would not come in. And I've heard stories like this before. So I think this lack of research, lack of information, can create some things like that, where some of us that are dealing with it don't feel supported. So as we're saying this, another final thought is please reach out to those groups here at Corgi Town USA. I've gone through it. Dr. Evenson's going through it. We're part of these support groups that go through it. You're not alone. Okay. Reach out any way we can help you. We're here for support. All we care about is you and your pup.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
I don't know that we care about other people too.
we care about you and your pup.
Yeah, well,
You and your pup as other people.
Well, yeah, but like the people who don't like animals, do we?
They don't listen to the show.
That's true. That's true. No, we care about you. We care about your pup. We care about the whole family dynamic of this too.
Sure.
That's and we could do a whole show on that. The family dynamic of what happens to the whole family, because your fur babies are part of the whole family. What is the family dynamic
illness and
look
stress?
like? And,
yeah.
And all that stuff. And that's a whole other show. But for right now, get the information, make your own decision that your own heart can deal with.
And we're happy to guide you as best we can with the information we have.
And love all the animals.
Yeah. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, please tell Chet is the best boy in the world.
Yes, he is.
He is the bestest boy.
Yes. Thank you so much. Please have a wonderful rest of your evening.
You too.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Well, another heavy-hearted episode.
True.
We were good at doing those anytime it's
are.
around DM. But we hope this information is useful to you. I wanted to talk about it because I'm very clear with how I feel about things. Kat, of course, is part of it as well. And anytime I read something that might differ from something that I've been touting or teaching, I want to bring attention to it.
Exactly.
Okay, here's what we read. Maybe, are we wrong here? Let's talk about it. And that's the whole idea behind this episode.
We can't be closed-minded about this thing.
Nope.
We
and we're not.
Only make decisions. We only do things based on the information that we have at the moment. And that's all we can do. Yeah. That is all we can ever do in anything in life. And so this is new information that comes to light. Where does it fit into the big picture? We don't know yet, but it's information, and you can make a better decision based on the information you have. Right at this moment, you have more information than you did before you turned on this podcast.
Out of love and caring. Out of love and caring for those beloved pups and you. Thank you for joining us. Yes. We're going to call this our season finale for season 6. We will see you back in a couple months for season 7 premiere. Yeah. Season 7, we have some exciting announcements to roll out. Absolutely. The show is evolving, changing in beautiful ways, and we're so grateful for you. We couldn't do it without you. Please like and subscribe. If you're sad this is the end of the season, we have 137 other episodes for you to comb through on both the audios as well as YouTube and Roku channel. That's right. We're going to be on your television in your homes. Thank you so much for sticking with us. We'll see you next season.
Bye-bye.